Thank you, Geeta Madam, for the wonderful anchoring you are doing to make the session interesting and well coordinated. And very much thank you, Sunil Bhai, for expressing a great affection and also laying down the background of the discussion which we are going to have today. And my special thanks and my special respect to Honorable Shri I.P. Bansal ji, from whom we have been learning many things since last many years, since when we have been appearing before sir, and since when I was joining the tribunal and sir was at that time leaving from the Mumbai bench. So the wisdom he was giving me like an elder brother, I mean, I cannot forget that. So many thanks to you, sir, once again, and special thanks for chairing this session and I mean, I would say making us privileged to be part in the privileged company of yours. So thank you very much, sir. So what I was thinking, and special thanks to all the audience, the the uh, professional colleagues of mine, my brothers and sister, whether chartered accountants or advocates or anybody who is interested in sharing, listening to my thoughts on this topic, which are close to my heart. All the three topics, that is Benami law, Anti-Money Laundering Law, and Black Money Act, and their special effect and interplay with the income tax law. So what I was thinking, I was in a little dilemma that I do not know how many of you have heard me earlier with respect to the fundamentals of Benami. So should I touch that again? Alternatively, what I have in my bouquet today is I have brought out a special module whereby I am presenting on the interplay of Benami law. So in interplay, I will touch upon the Benami law basics also, and the anti-money laundering basics also, Black Money Act basics also, and few other things as we may be required to touch upon by way of question and answer session, as Bansal sir will be raising, or through the audience, or through Geeta Madam, or in any manner. So I am still in a dilemma. Kindly hint me, Bansal sir, if you can, so that I can take up. Will it be all right to take up that interplay itself and then cover Benami also in between, side by side, everything, so that we become clear about fundamentals of Benami also? Or you would like to touch upon me only Benami today?
Ashwini ji, as you like. It is as you like, as you have prepared. It's okay.
Okay. So what I would do is, in fact, I believe that because I have spoken at number of times with regard to Benami, so I would touch upon that interplay in which the flavor of Benami, of course, would be there as a base, and there will be added flavors of other laws also, so that all these things, whatever I have brought for you, all the flowers which I have brought for you, I'm able to present all of them to you. And if you would be keen to listen to me again on any of these topics in detail, in extenso, on the advanced side also, then we can join again at any time as would be convenient to you all. So with that, if I am allowed to share my screen so that I can share my PPT, with the help of which I will like to begin with my deliberations.
आप शेयर कर दीजिए सर।
जी सर। Now my screen is visible?
No, sir, not yet. Sir, you open PPT first, then minimize it, then share screen.
I have done it because I am getting the message StreamYard.com is sharing a window.
सर आपके स्क्रीन पे नीचे शेयर का ऑप्शन आ रहा होगा।
हाँ, मैंने वो ऑप्शन क्लिक किया है और अभी नीचे लिखा हुआ है StreamYard.com is sharing a window. Stop sharing. So
सर
since it is already
शेयर स्क्रीन का ऑप्शन है वहाँ पर.
okay, I'll do it again. Stop share it. अभी हो रहा हुआ क्या?
जी सर.
Now my screen is visible.
Yes sir.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Sir, please continue. Now screen is visible, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So interplays of laws. So इसमें दोनों मैं भी visible हूँ, मतलब हम लोग भी visible हैं और screen भी visible
Yes
है.
sir. Yes sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, आप हमको नहीं देख पा रहे होंगे, हम आपको
Yes.
देख पा रहे हैं.
Thank you very much. So as I shared with you, friends, the time has come when even if we do not want to practice in a particular area, but we as a professional are expected to have awareness of the surrounding environment which is impacting us, or any of the transaction being done by us means us, or I will include our clients, being done by our clients in any manner, so that if I am checking, examining any particular transaction, advising in the future course of a particular transaction, I am able to advise holistically to my client in a manner that full compliance of law is made. So therefore it is necessary to not only have the basic awareness of all the laws surrounding me, particularly laws dealing with the economic offenses, but also the interplay, strong interaction, impact of each other, cross bearing of each law upon the other, so that I am able to understand whether I means I or my client are doing the transaction in any manner in which knowingly or unknowingly some non-compliance is taking place. Wherever I find the holistic acceptance of the transaction would be difficult exercise, then I must re-examine it. And to re-examine it, I must know the basic fabric of each of the laws dealing with economic offenses. So this slide, which you can see that two chimpanzees are there, which were attached by the Enforcement Directorate. So now you all must be thinking that how come chimpanzee having been attached by the Enforcement Directorate? I mean, very, very ridiculous thing on the face of it. So that is what I was sharing a few minutes before with Sunil Bhai, that what happens nowadays is that it is difficult to even gaze the canvas, the white canvas, which each of this law and the law enforcement agency are having within its reach, and that too within the statutory framework, not doing anything illegally, within the statutory framework, to catch hold of the transaction we could not have imagined. I will be sharing some of these things which will definitely open our eyes to make us understand that we should definitely have the basic understanding of all of these laws. So I will now give the reasoning how come legally it was possible to make attachment of these two creatures by the Enforcement Directorate. The charge was that some certificate with regard to taking possession of these two persons, two creatures, was some certificate was fraudulently obtained. So some forgery was done in creating those two certificates. Then some violation of Wildlife Protection Act was done by the person who was having them. So both of these laws are named as one of the scheduled offenses in the schedule to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So there was a breach, a known violation of these laws. In other words, we can say there was a commission of scheduled offense by the person, said person, concerned person. So since there was a scheduled offense committed by him, and the PMLA law states that if any proceeds are generated from any scheduled offense, then those proceeds can be attached by the Enforcement Directorate under Section 5, bracket 1, read with other subsections of the Act. So therefore, it was alleged that these are the proceeds of the so and so offences which I mentioned, and therefore ED had the powers within the framework of the law to make attachment and then take possession of these. So luckily, fortunately, they were handed over later on to the zoo authorities for their proper upkeep. But that is how the law takes its own course. Now, this is another classic example of a situation which was faced, out of the blue. The facts were like that. One distillery unit was established in the state of Rajasthan in the year 2005, and there were some allegation about the violation of Environment Protection Act and Water Pollution Act, Water Pollution Control Act in the year 2009. That is 4 years after the setting up of distillery unit, on the ground that untreated water, that too in excess of the licensed capacity of the production, was discharged into the river by the said distillery. So some complaint was filed by the Pollution Control Board of the state with the competent authorities, and then FIR was filed, and then matter reached in the court also with regard to the alleged violation. But subsequently, the water treatment plant was corrected, it was repaired, and there were some kind of other arrangements done. The license capacity was also increased. So no final action was taken by the Pollution Control Board. But suddenly, in 2013, ED comes into picture and sends notice for attachment of the entire factory. Now, we thought, what has happened? I mean, the client approached us, and we were also, for a moment, flabbergasted that how can the Water Pollution Control Act violation lead to the attachment of the factory? Again, the reasoning given was something like that there was since contaminated water, untreated water discharged into the river, which led to the violation of Water Pollution Control Act. So then I asked another query that how come offense of money laundering has taken place, because there has to be generation of proceeds of crime. Then the reasoning which came before us was that it has been alleged that since the extra water has been discharged, that means extra production has been done by the said unit. And extra production means extra sales means extra profit, and then profit must have been invested into the factory building. That is why factory building can be said to have been built from the proceeds of crime, and that is why we are giving notice for issuance of attachment of factory building, and thereafter taking over the possession of the factory building. So 500 workers were working at that time in the factory. Somehow we approached the honorable tribunal, wisdom prevailed, and status quo was granted. But the matter is still hot, and because tribunal is not functioning as on date, it is defunct. But the ED is still into action, and they have filed prosecution complaint. And on Pollution Control Board has not done anything so far, no arrest, nothing. But on the behest of the Enforcement Directorate, I mean, the complaint has been filed, and preparations are being made for arresting the person who has committed the alleged offense. I mean, though the offense of alleged violations of Water Pollution Act, etc., they are yet to be proved. But that is how the Enforcement Directorate is proceeding nowadays in the country. Then, friends, you must have read this news in the newspaper. Modi's Benami law has companies running for cover. So, I mean, thousands of properties all over the country, they have been attached, infrastructure companies, and particularly in Rajasthan, who have acquired land from the members of SC/ST category, because under the Rajasthan Tenancy Act, Section 42 of the Asset Act, it regulates the holding of land, ownership of land, transfer of land between the persons belonging to SC/ST category only, and transfer to non-member is generally prohibited. So if such kind of transactions have been done by the infrastructure companies by appointing their nominee who was a member belonging to the SC/ST category, then it has been alleged that such kind of member was such kind of person appointed by the infrastructure companies or the colonizing companies. They were Benamidar of the companies, and that is how the asset acquired is Benami asset, and that is how the huge number of assets, I mean, running into acres and acres, they have been attached. Even if the flats were built, even if the thousands of flats have been built upon that, but the properties have been attached. Recently, Honorable Rajasthan High Court, in the case of Kalyan Build Mart, has given a very good judgment, which will come to the rescue. But still, a lot of hue and cries there in the country on this issue. Then you must have also read about this news that CBI and ED action may now follow IT default probes. So the government has come out with a scheme of multi-agency scrutiny, and whereby 3 agencies are coordinating among themselves as well as using the power of higher order data analytics. You must have heard about it. So MOU has been entered into between the SEBI and CBDT, and similar MOUs have taken place between the other agencies also. So there will be free flow of data, exchange of data from one agency to the other. You must have also heard that now the Enforcement Directorate has also been provided access to the database which was being used by the agencies involved in the task of criminal investigation, such as CBI and police station, special cell, etc., EOW, etc. So working in tandem, these agencies were enforced the law in a multidisciplinary manner, like all these laws which I have mentioned, be it Benami, PMLA, Income Tax Act, SEBI laws, FEMA, corporate laws, Income Tax Act, etc. They will be simultaneously invoked, and if the offense has been done leading to the violation under more than one law, so then the action would be taken by the respective agencies. Simultaneous actions may be taken by the respective agencies, which may be a cumulative action or which may be simply a mutually exclusive section, depending upon the facts and circumstances of the case. So at times there can be mutually exclusive actions also. I mean, the facts are such that only one action under one law will exclude the action under the law, but there would be circumstances and facts like that simultaneous applications or cumulative action under various laws would also be possible. So this slide I have made to demonstrate a graphical presentation that how these laws can impact us in a more than, I mean, tolerable manner. And if you would notice, I have kept Benami law under the pivotal role. It is because of the fact that now Benami law has, because whatever violations would be done, the findings are that it will be quite probable that some transactions have been done in pseudo names, in some other names, in a disguised manner. So in that situation, there would be a violation under the Benami law. So, I mean, how these laws are going to affect each other, in what manner it is going to happen. Is anything wrong?
Yes, sir. PPT scroll नहीं हो रही आपकी, वही बोल रहे थे.
Sunil ji, Bansal sir, am I audible? Can you please unmute and tell me?
I am. Hello.
Sunil ji,
Yes. I am unmute. I am unmute and you are audible, sir.
अच्छा, नहीं, मेरी पीपीटी स्क्रॉल नहीं हो रही क्या?
ना, नहीं हो रही है, स्क्रॉल नहीं हो रही है.
तो मेरी जितनी भी पीपीटीज थी मैं स्क्रॉल कर रहा हूँ, वो दिख नहीं रही.
नहीं, स्क्रॉल हो ही नहीं रही स्क्रीन पे, सर.
तो पीपीटी नजर ही नहीं आ रही स्क्रीन पर क्या?
ओनली फर्स्ट पेज इज कमिंग, सर.
तो मैं तो कम से कम 10-15 पीपीटीज रन कर चुका हूँ, तो इसका क्या सोल्यूशन है? मैं तो स्क्रॉल कर रहा हूँ.
ये ज्योति जी आप देखिए इसको. गीता, हेलो, अनम्यूट कीजिए आपको. ज्योति जी आप देखिए.
सर आपको शीट सिलेक्ट करनी होगी.
नहीं, शीट ही सिलेक्ट की हुई है मैंने तो.
सर साइड में.
अच्छा, अभी देखिए,
कीबोर्ड्स के नीचे शीट सिलेक्शन का ऑप्शन आ रहा है, तो आपको वहां से शीट नंबर सिलेक्ट करना होगा.
अभी फर्स्ट शीट आ रही है.
हाँ जी.
फर्स्ट शीट तो सामने दिख रही है.
अभी सेकंड शीट आई क्या?
हाँ जी.
आ गई.
तो वो जब मैं इसको स्लाइड शो मोड में चला रहा हूँ तब नहीं चल रहा है, इसका मतलब.
जी.
कोई बात नहीं, ऐसे चलाते हैं.
मैन्युअली सिलेक्ट करना होगा सर.
तो जब मैंने बोला था कि यू कैन सी द चिंपैंजीज इन फ्रंट,
नहीं आई, तब नहीं आई.
तो उस टाइम गीता मैडम बोल देना चाहिए था ना. चलिए, कोई बात नहीं. Please keep me updated so that I can accordingly change the course.
सर
Okay,
अभी
no.
yes sir
अभी दिख रही है चिंपैंजीज वाली?
हाँ
yes
वो
sir
दिख रही है.
अच्छा, तो मेरे को बताते जाइएगा अगर नहीं नजर आए. आप चिंपैंजीज वाली एक बार देख लीजिए आप सभी लोग, so that I can turn it over.
Okay.
And then now this is case study number 2 which I discuss about the distillery.
yes sir
Okay. So एक काम करेंगे, ये PPTs मैं सारी आपको भेज दूंगा. आप सभी मेंबर्स को ये भेज दीजिएगा.
yes sir
Okay, now can we see this recent newspaper cutting?
yes sir yes
Okay. Then this CBI ED action may now follow IT default probes, multi-agency scrutiny.
yes sir
Okay. Then this is MOU between SEBI and CBDT.
yes sir
Okay. And then interplay of various laws dealing with economic offenses.
yes sir
Right. And then this next one is
schedule
scheduled. Oh,
yes sir
okay. Let me see. यहाँ पर था मैं. I was here. So
Yes, sir.
friends, can please see interplay of various laws dealing with economic offenses. I have kept Benami law in the central pivot, and all other laws around it like Companies Act, PMLA, Income Tax Act, SEBI, then we have FEMA, then we have Black Money Act, etc., etc. They are hovering around it. So we will be discussing about them in detail later on. But kindly notice that I have kept Benami law in the central pivot. It is because of the fact the agencies have given a finding that whatever violations would take place, Benami law will definitely be attracted, because it is quite probable that some of the transaction by an offender will be done in a pseudonym, in a disguised manner. So that is how Benami law will come into picture. Now I am trying to explain this entire gamut with the help of this slide, smuggling, scheduled offense. Right? I have kept this word smuggling in between. The slide is open.
yes sir
Gitaji, slide is there.
yes sir
All right. Now it is okay then. So I am trying to give one example to convey my thoughts, what I'm trying to say, how these laws will have a cumulative impact and in what manner it will be mutually exclusive. Both the situations I will portray. Now suppose a person does smuggling. Say he earns by way of smuggling, say 10 crore rupees. Now one set of situation would be something like this, that he in his income tax return, he explains, he claims, or he mentions, he asserts that he has earned income by way of smuggling of rupees 10 crores and pays tax thereon. So now let us examine what are the laws which he have violated. First of all, Income Tax Act, no, because 10 crore entire amount has been disclosed. Any Benami transaction, no, because he's doing it in his own name. Any anti-money laundering law, that is PMLA violation, has taken place. And according to my understanding, no, because he is saying yes, it is income from smuggling only. He is not saying something else, doing something else, meaning thereby he is not converting the bad money into good money. Though there may be some discussion on this after the recent amendment, but the basic conceptual position is like that. Would there be any violation under FEMA or Customs Act? Yes, there can be. Any violation under Companies Act? Yes, if he's doing some fraud, then only. Now let us, any Black Money Act? No, because everything is in India. So now let us try to create another situation here after changing the facts in a slightly different manner. Now suppose whatever amount he had earned, that is rupees 10 crore rupees, out of this 10 crore rupees, he sends abroad 2 crore rupees straight away. And out of rupees 8 crore rupees, he shows as income from trading. So suppose he shows income from trading as rupees 4 crores. So he pays tax on 4 crores. Out of the remaining 4 crore rupees, he gives it to cash. He gives it to some company, namely B Limited. Say his name is Mr. R, and he gives it to the company B Limited, so that the B Limited can give money by check back to his company R Limited in the form of share application money. And R Limited issues share certificates, makes allotment of shares to B Limited, and B Limited becomes a shareholder in R Limited. Now, in these circumstances, let us re-evaluate that what kind of violations have taken place. First of all, customs, FEMA, of course, whatever will happen because he has spent 2 crores illegally abroad. Black Money Act, yes, because he is stashing rupees 2 crores abroad in his undisclosed bank account. Out of rupees remaining 8 crores, now on 4 crores he is paying the taxes. So violation of income tax has taken place with respect to remaining rupees 6 crores because he is paying taxes on rupees 4 crores only. So there is income tax violation only. Now, whether there is violation of anti-money laundering law, that is PMLA, yes, because now this time he is converting bad money into good money by showing it as income from trading. So he has done violation of PMLA by doing the offense of money laundering, by portraying the bad money as good money. So therefore, he can be said to have committed the offense of money laundering also. Then he has done offense under Companies Act. Yes, section 212(8) and section 447 will make him liable for prosecution under Companies Act. That is by Serious Fraud Investigation Office. And then last but not the least comes Benami Act. So whether he can be said to have committed any offense under Benami law. Now, since he has issued the share, his company has issued the shares to B Limited. B Limited is Benamidar, real owner remains R. So there would be allegation from the Benami Prohibition Unit also that since B Limited is Benamidar, so therefore shares held are Benami property. So therefore the attachment would take place of the Benami property, etc. And he will be liable for the offense of as beneficiary and owner, as offense as Bansal sir has mentioned under section 53 of PBPT Act, which we will discuss in little more detail. So friends, that is how you can see that overall one transaction, but its sub-transactions or the manner in which that entire transaction has been structured is giving rise to many offenses simultaneously. This next slide. Now, as I mentioned, that the new findings of the investigation agencies is that most commonly found ingredient is in the violation of laws is related to economic offenses is that the transactions done are Benami in nature because of the reasons which I have explained to you short while ago. Yes. So what exactly is Benami transaction? Lot of hue and cry has been made on this. Lot of fuss has been created. Everybody is making his own guesswork on this. But the way I try to understand and explain this transaction is something like this, that whether my slide is open, titled as Benami transaction background. Geeta ji?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So the way I would like to explain, suppose somebody asks me that, Satyaneja, how would you explain this law in 1 or 2 lines? So I would say that Benami transaction is a transaction where duality has come into place, where the things remain dual, not singular as it should have been. Something which we can see, the things exist beyond that. In other words, in legal language, the way I would explain is something like that. That suppose there is one person, gentleman, Mr. A. Now he wanted to buy a property from B, but he buying the property directly in his name, he creates or brings into picture another person, namely C, and he asks Mr. B to transfer the property to Mr. C, for which payment is being made by Mr. A to Mr. B. So instead of 2 persons coming into picture, now 3 persons have come into picture, that is A, B, and C. Otherwise, the transaction should have confined to 2 persons only, namely A and B. But a third person has also come into picture, who is becoming the title holder of the property, but the real ownership control remains upon Mr. A only. So that is how we can explain and understand this transaction in broad spectrum. So the ownership is divided into 2 parts. That is, first part is that the title remains upon one person, that is Mr. C. Whereas the ownership control, the real ownership remains with another person here, Mr. A. So whole ownership has been divided into 2 parts. So instead of singular, it becomes dual. Dual means there is a duality, there difference in the ownership. Owners is also is divided into 2 parts, as you can see on the slide also. Now, the requisite condition here is that that first condition is that the consideration should be paid by the real owner, not by the person who is holding the property as title holder. So the person holding the property as a title holder should not have paid for the consideration. Consideration should have been paid by the another person. And the second necessary condition is that another person should be the real owner. That other person should be enjoying the property as a real owner. So should be getting the benefits from that property. So should be beneficiary to the property also. He is not only paying the consideration, he is standing at beneficiary also. Meaning thereby the full control on the usage and the possession should be of the person who is paying the consideration. Now these two conditions are cumulative. If only one condition is fulfilled, it is not Benami. If both the conditions are fulfilled, then only it can be Benami. Because the word used there between the two conditions in section 2(9)(a) is and. So since word and has been used, therefore both the conditions have to be fulfilled simultaneously. Now I will try to explain it with the help of an example. Suppose my driver comes to me and as a benevolence, I give him my car to him and I say, okay, this is my old car. You keep it with him. You get it registered in your own name and enjoy this car. Keep this car, take it away and keep it with you. And then he gets the property transferred, that car transferred in his name. He enjoys the benefit. Can it be said to Benami? Because consideration has been paid by me. Now he is the title holder of the same. But in my view, it will not be Benami at the moment. As per law, it will not be, because he is having a property now which is his own property, though consideration was paid by me, but which has been gifted to him by me, and I am not having any control on the usage. He is not keeping it for me, he is keeping it for himself. Now, if I change the fact little bit in the same situation, suppose I tell my driver, okay, take the car, get it registered in your name, and keep it for me. Whenever I will call, you have to bring it. My family needs it, I need it, my friends need it, whomsoever I will nominate, whatever I will say, you have to do it. So in that situation, can it be said to be Benami? Yes. In that situation, it would be Benami, because in that case, duality has been created. He is keeping the car, but for my benefit. Since he is keeping it for my benefit, it will be Benami. So this was a very simple example to explain the concept in simple language. Now, what are the factors leading to the origin of Benami law? Why people do Benami transactions? Now, when the Law Commission had given its report way back in 1974, because 1969 assignment was given to the Law Commission first time in the country, that please find out what are the factors which are leading to Benami transaction in the economy, which are denting the economy. So the Law Commission submitted its first report in 1974, and various factors were mentioned there. And tax evasion was not the first factor. The first factor was violation of other laws, allied civil laws, for example, Urban Land Ceiling Act, etc., whereby the people were buying land in pseudo names. And since people were buying land in pseudo names, so therefore it was denting the economy. The whole purpose of bringing out these laws to eradicate the feudal system, the Jamidari Pratha, that was not being met. Similarly, to play fraud on the creditors, to get away from the possible liabilities which may be imposed and which may be required to be discharged by liquidating the assets or by way of attachment of assets. So that is another purpose. And tax evasion, of course, is there, and stashing of black money, etc., and to do corrupt practices, etc., etc. There are various other factors also which you can find mentioned in the report which was given by the Law Commission Standing Committee of the Parliament under the chairmanship of Mr. Veerappa Moily in 2013, just before the coming up of the present dispensation in the country. Okay. Then how the transaction has been, Benami transaction, how it has been defined under the law, under the present legislation named as Prohibition of Benami Transaction Act 1988, which was originally for the first time brought out in 1988, but which remained as a paper tiger only because the law enforcement agencies were not created, and few other reasons. I do not know what have been the political reasons at that time, because it was brought in a much haste. But despite bringing it in much haste, nothing was done. So there must have been some political reasons for that, and that is why it remained as a paper tiger. But in 2016, 1st November 2016, the law has been substantially amended, substantially. And thereafter it has been brought into effect with effect from 1st November 2016. So everything has been redefined, broadened, etc., widened, etc. So similar is the situation with the definition of Benami transaction, as was stated by Shri I.P. Bansalji also, that now the definition is quite exhaustive, and there are 4 parts to the definition, which is given in section 29 bracket A, bracket B, bracket C, and bracket D. So 4 categories of Benami transactions have been given. So I would first of all deal with the category A, which I have already explained before you, but the exact wording I am reading, which says that if the property is transferred or held by Benamidar and the consideration is paid by the beneficial owner and the property held for the benefit of the beneficial owner. So all these conditions should be cumulatively met. If these are not cumulatively met, then this situation cannot be said to be Benami, a situation leading to a Benami transaction. Now, there are some exceptions which we'll definitely go through. For example, person acting in fiduciary capacity, such as executor, trustee, partner, director. If property has been transferred to their name in fiduciary capacity, then this clause A will not be applicable. Then if the property is held by Karta on behalf of HUF, then also this benefit of exclusion will be there. Then if property is held by a spouse or by a child on behalf of another person, if Mr. A buys a property in the name of his wife or in the name of his child, then that property will also not come into the category of Benami transaction because of the specific exclusions which has been given under the legislation. Similarly, if the property is purchased in the name of brother, sister, lineal ascendant, or descendant, properties purchased in the name of brother, sister, lineal ascendant, descendant, or ascendant, but if the property is purchased in the name of joint ownership only then the benefit exclusion will be there. So in other words, suppose property is purchased in the name of my brother by me, and if I am not the joint owner, it will be Benami. This is a very, very dangerous proposition, because at times we forget to take care of this position, and we think that if I have purchased a property in the name of my mother because of auspicious reasons in whatever manner, and if I claim the ownership of that, then it will be Benami property. Suppose property is standing in the name of my mother, in my balance sheet I am showing it as my property, then because of lack of joint ownership, it may be treated as Benami. So these are the exceptions. The only additional condition imposed upon this is that if the consideration is paid out of known sources, only then the benefit of consideration will be available. If the consideration is not paid out of known sources, then the benefit of this exclusion will not be available. So the question may arise here, what do we mean by known sources? Because the legislature has not mentioned the word declared sources or tax paid sources or disclosed sources. They have used the word known sources. So I could not find the user of this word in any other legislation. So there must be some definite intention behind it. So known means something which can be described. So which may be tax paid, may not be tax paid, but Benami authorities have no concern with that. So, Benami law does not have any concern with that. What is to be necessarily described here is that I must be in a position to spell out the source, the nature of source. For example, I will say I will pay it out of my bank account, in which my savings are there, my salary income is deposited, etc., etc. So I must be able to spell it out. Then the second category of transactions are where the property is held in fictitious name. Suppose a person is having a property and getting it registered or keeping it or holding it in the name of any fictitious structure. For example, he is keeping it in the name of some pet dogs, some god or goddess, so who do not exist in the eyes of law, then that property straight away can be treated as Benami. The moment it is found that it is lying in a fictitious name, that property is Benami, that belongs to the government. Similarly, the next category, that is 29C, says where the owner of the property, owner means here registered owner, where the owner of the property is not aware about the ownership or denies about the ownership, then that property will also be straight away treated as Benami property. Here many questions would arise, whether if a person though denies the ownership, but he is a registered owner, so whether the provisions of Indian Evidence Act, specifically section 91 etc. and 92 etc. will be also kept in mind or not, who says when there is a written documentary evidence of transferring the title of a person or ownership of the person, whether that can take precedence, that will take precedence over the any other oral evidence, or the oral evidence shall take precedence over it. So here the oral evidence will be, suppose a statement is recorded of a person whereby he denies the ownership of the property, but on the other hand he is a registered owner, he appeared before the registration authorities and get the property transferred in his name. So what will be, preferred? Whether the provisions of Indian Evidence Act have been washed by this clause C, or they will still subsist. So my answer to that would be that so long as any provision has not been specifically erased, that will have its own course, because this law will also function within the statutory framework, constitutional framework of the country. So if this law has to work within the constitutional framework of the country, then other laws, unless specifically erased, they will have their own evidentiary value or legal value, whatever we may say. So here also, if I'm able to prove that he or she is a real owner, whatever statement may have been given, that may be due to lack of knowledge or under pressure or threat, etc., then accordingly the case should be decided keeping in view all these facts. Then we have clause D, last clause, but one of the most dangerous clauses and most clause which is prone to misuse and is being misused by the Income Tax Department, especially by the BPU, that is clause 29D. So clause 29D says where the payer of the consideration is not traceable or is fictitious, then the property will be Benami. So this clause has been worded quite vaguely, because I can understand if the person is fictitious, payer of the consideration is fictitious, but I cannot understand that it will be still Benami if it is not, he is not merely traceable. Suppose the transaction was done by Mr. A with Mr. B. Mr. B, say, provided the consideration or paid the consideration for the same. Now, by way of loan or in whatever manner, now Mr. B becomes underground, becomes inaccessible for any reasons, not in control of Mr. A. So merely on that ground, if A's property will be Benami, that is not an acceptable position or fair position under law. I could understand that if the legislature would have used the words, if the person is not even identifiable, paying the consideration is not even identifiable by the person who is owning the property as a registered owner, then one can understand. But merely because he is not traceable, I think something wrong has happened here, unthoughtful has happened. And second thing which I would like to mention here as a word of precaution, that clause D, the scope of clause D can be invoked only when the person owning the property does not claim that he himself has paid the consideration and asserts that the consideration has been paid by someone else. But in case he is saying that consideration has been paid by him only, then the jurisdiction to invoke this clause D is ousted on the face of it. Because under such circumstances, when the person he is himself saying that he has paid the consideration, there arises no question of any other person paying the consideration being non-traceable or fictitious. Yes, there may be a charge that the person himself is saying that I have paid the consideration, he is not able to explain the source of the same. There may be certain kind of situation, but for that purpose, income tax law is there. If that person is not able to throw light on the and not able to substantiate the amount of sources, then whatever consequences under the income tax law will take place, that will take place. But that property merely becomes Benami, I have strong doubt on that. Merely on that ground, it will not be Benami. so long as he claims that he himself has paid the consideration. Then who are the authorities who are governing the enforcement of this law? So, authorities under this law, friends, as you know, that the first authority I would mention is initiating officer, who is of the rank of assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner of income tax, and who has been designated under the PVPT Act as initiating officer on the deputation basis, and he has powers to conduct inquiries, impound documents, etc., as are given generally. And then he has also the power to make provisional attachment of the property under section 24(3) and 24(4), which he can refer to the urging authority. Urging authority can confirm the attachment and like that. So he can issue show cause notice under section 24(1), and the show cause notice under section 24(1) is issued, and whenever it is issued, then the IU has the time limit for 90 days from the end of the month in which the notice is issued. So you can say 3 to 4 months time limit initiating officer has after issuance of notice under section 24, during which they have to decide whether the alleged property is Benami property or not. So once the initiating officer would give notices, show cause notices, there will be occasion for the affected parties, the notices, to submit their replies to the initiating officer. And friends, here I want to place a word of caution that though this law is being implemented or enforced by the income tax officers themselves, but believe me, there is nothing common between income tax law and Benami law. The fabric is totally different. The game of burden is different. The onus to proof is different. And so therefore it has to be handled differently, very meticulously, in very, very legal and professional manner. And then we have approving authority. So all the actions, particularly action of making provisional attachment orders, they are approved by the approving authority, who's the rank of additional commissioner and joint commissioner of income tax. And after the approval only, the initiating officers passes his orders as have been prescribed under the act. Then we have adjudicating authorities. Now, so far, the adjudicating authority was which was functioning and which was discharging the function of doing adjudication of order passed by the initiating officer, was being done by the authority, which was common with PMLA. And there was bench of 3 members chaired by, CIT rank officer or joint secretary rank. But in the recent amendment done in this budget by the government of India, what they have done is that they have given this charge of doing adjudication of the order. That is, adjudication means once the order is finalized by the initiating officer, then he has to refer it for adjudication to the adjudicating authority under section 26(5) of the PVPT Act. So now the charge has been given to the competent authorities for doing the adjudication, competent authority of SAFEMA, meaning thereby the competent authority which was so far discharging the functions of under SAFEMA, that is smugglers activities, and that is NDPS, that is narcotics and drugs. So these 2 functions broadly that said authority was discharging. Now it has been given another function of adjudicating upon the orders of the initiating officers. So far in the country, 4 competent authorities are there, which is being headed by 2 persons only, and 3rd person is being also appointed. So Bombay and Ahmedabad under 1 charge, then Calcutta and Chennai under 1 charge, and then Delhi another charge. Delhi person is being appointed very soon. Calcutta and Chennai person is already there, and then gentleman at Bombay and very kind officer, Bombay and Ahmedabad is already there. So fresh appointment is being made at Delhi also. So then we have, after the order is passed by the adjudicating authority, then the initiating officer passes the order under section 24(1). Then after passing the orders, passes the order under section 24(4). In fact, the way the system works is that initiating officer issues show cause notice under section 24(1). Then within a framework of time period of 90 days, he has to decide whether the property is Benami or not. If he holds that it is not Benami, then he will release the provisional attachment order passed under section 24(3), which was issued by him simultaneously on issuing of notice under section 24(1). Then under section 24(4), he passes the order within 3 to 4 months. If he finds that the property is Benami, then he, in a way, continues the provisional attachment order which was passed by him under Section 24(3). And the order is continuing till the passing of order by the adjudicating authority. And 1 year's time frame has been given to the adjudicating authority. Then adjudicating authority decides the matter after hearing both the parties. And if it is not found to be Benami, the reference filed by the initiating officer is rejected and property is held to be not Benami. But if it is found by the adjudicating authority that it is Benami, then the provisional attachment order is confirmed. Against the order of the adjudicating authority, both the parties, whosoever may be aggrieved, have right to file appeal to the appellate tribunal. Now, appellate tribunal does not mean income tax appellate tribunal. They have a separate tribunal, which is also tribunal under SAFEMA. So it is a 3-member bench, in fact, and appeals are to be heard by the division bench. But nowadays there is no quorum. The tribunal is lying defunct. It is not functioning. So the situation is like that the enforcement agencies are fully active, but the remedial agencies providing remedial measures are not functional largely. And then we have administrator who has the role to receive and manage the property and to dispose of the property. So he is of the officer of the rank of income tax officer. Then it has been provided under the law that initiating officer can take assistance from other authorities such as Income Tax Authority, Customs, Central Excise Department, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, then Recognized Stock Exchange, RBI, under authorities and working under Foreign Exchange Management Act, SEBI, and any other authority, whether set up by the central government or the state government. Then let me take a few more examples of how this law will have interplay effect with other laws. So first issue which I have raised here is, which was being put forth by Sunil Bhai also. So I will put it forth in an appropriate fashion so that we can understand the provisions of law which will be governing the position in this regard. So first situation which I am taking is that whether the provisions of Benami law can apply to the transactions covered under Section 68 and 69 of the Act, of the Income Tax Act. Now, what do I mean here? Now, suppose addition has been made under Section 68, treating the shares as bogus share capital, and or if the loan has been treated as bogus. Now, I will try to explain it with the help of an example. Suppose Mr. R gives money. In one case, what happened? I will take a real life situation. In one case, what happened? This case probably belonged to Bhopal. One gentleman, during the course of search, made an offer to surrender, and that is how it offered to tax an aggregate amount of rupees 25 crores. And the breakup of the total amount surrendered included one item as bogus share capital issued by R Limited to B Limited. His name is Mr. R, and R Limited is his company in which he and his family, they are shareholder and directors, etc. So he made a surrender. He paid the entire amount of tax on 25 crores, and he thought that the matter is ended. But actually, matter did not end because matter began there, and that is, how? When the BPU issued him a notice inviting him for a discussion over a cup of coffee and for recording of the statement. So, and this bitter coffee he was offered, but he thought that since he has already paid the tax, so he, raising his collar up, he went to meet the officer and stated that, yes, sir, what is to be done? So PPO officer, sir, said, yes, I have to record your statement. He said, why? Because the answer was, because you have made a surrender under the income tax law. He said, yes, I have made a surrender and I have paid tax thereon. The officer said, hold on, let me understand the situation and let me record your response on that. So the recording of the statement, process of recording of the statement started. So first question was, yes, you have made a surrender. He said, yes. Okay, so how much amount? 25 crores. Okay, this is the breakup. Yes, this is the breakup. So this breakup includes amount paid, issued share capital issued to B Limited, which is bogus. Amount brought by B Limited is bogus, etc., etc. He said, yes, I have mentioned that. Okay. So you have paid tax on that. You admit that? Yes, sir. Okay. So that means B Limited issued check to R Limited, which before that you had given cash to B Limited, and after receiving the cash, B Limited issued check to R Limited, and in lieu of check, R Limited issued them the share certificate. Answer. Now suddenly there is a silence. Then these are neither yes nor no, but the silence cannot convert it into no. So that means the admitted position which was put forth by Mr. R was something like this: that he gave cash to B Limited. B Limited in lieu returns the in lieu issues the check to R Limited. R Limited in lieu of that issues the share certificates of to B Limited, and whatever amount was given by B Limited, that is rupees 10 crore, R Limited makes use of that and buys the immovable property, which is reflected in his balance sheet, duly reflected, shown to the income tax department also. So now under these circumstances, what can be the possible circumstances? Again, we have to gauge every fact, examine every fact on its own set of, every case on its own set of facts. So if the admitted facts are like this, which I stated, then the allegation would be that the transaction is Benami and attachment would take place. But what is worth noting here is that what is exactly is Benami property. The IO would make an attempt to attach the property purchased by R Limited on the ground that this is a Benami property, on the ground that these are proceeds from the Benami property, etc., etc. I have written an article also in this, and the title of the article is that how long the menace of additions under section 68 and 69 shall keep haunting various assessees. Now here the menace is this attachment, because on the one hand he has paid taxes and now on the other hand he is being grilled. So in the admitted facts, what would be the reply? Something is Benami. But the only saving grace can be that what exactly is Benami. Now, as per my little understanding here, the IO would be, if he alleges that property purchased by R Limited Benami, according to me, that will not be Benami for various reasons which I have discussed. Now, what he may succeed in alleging that the shares held by B Limited in R Limited are Benami, because Mr. R is controlling the ownership of these shares, etc., etc. But kindly see, the situation is so alarming that if surrender is made, then the assessees must be aware of the situation, that the liability is not only of tax but under Benami law also. And liability is very serious because not only the property will be attached equivalent amount, there may be fine up to 25% of the market value of the property. Then there will be prosecution also under section 3, read with section 53 of the PPPT Act, etc., etc. So that is how the situation is very grim. Now, another situation which I have taken here is implication under section 56(2)(10), whereby gift is given. Now, here also two situations can take place. Suppose Mr. A gives gift to Mr. B. Now, if B buys some property from that gift, can it be Benami? This is a question which is being repeatedly asked from me. Now, if it will depend on whether action under income tax law and Benami law simultaneously can take place, or only action under one law will take place. Here I would say it will depend upon how the actions are taken by different authorities. Suppose the action is taken by the income tax department, whereby it is treated as that the gift is bogus. It was the money of Mr. B and the property has been purchased by him. So since it is B's money in B's hands, so there cannot be then another situation of treating the property as Benami. But suppose the gift is treated as genuine, but Benami law officer is successful in alleging that Mr. A is exercising full control over the property which is held in the name of Mr. B. Then it will be Benami property. A will be real beneficial owner and Mr. B will be the Benamidar. In that case, addition under section income tax may not be possible. So here action under one law shall mutually exclude the action under the other law. Now I'll take another example. Whenever actions are taken under GAR, General Anti-Avoidance Rules, what kind of actions can be taken then? Now I have tried to explain it with the help of another slide. I hope this ultimate parent and holding company slide is there before you, holding structure slide. I don't want to take a chance now that I keep on speaking and my audience is not able to see the slides. Geeta ji, can you confirm, or anyone please confirm whether my this ultimate parent company slide is there? Anyone there? Knock,
Yes,
knock.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sorry.
It is sure. Oh, it is. Yes. So, interplay with Income Tax Act, holding structure. Suppose there is one ultimate parent company, that is, say, US company. US company wants to make investment in India, but to get the benefit of taxation structure. Bansal Saab has passed many good orders while sitting from Bombay under transfer pricing and international taxation. So, taking the benefit of his presence, I will share this situation, put forth the situation that how we shall deal with such kind of situation here. So US company wants to make investment in Indian company, but to get the benefit of taxes, it comes through Mauritius or say Singapore route. So say it sets up one company in Mauritius, and Mauritius company in turn make investment in Indian company. Now what happens under the income tax assessments? The PPT clause, principal purpose test clause, is invoked, or say some other GAR provisions are invoked, and it is held that the benefit of DTA between India and Mauritius will not be granted because the Mauritian company is just a paper entity. It is not the real owner. It is not the real controller. The real controller is US company, and just Mauritius company is just a facade, having no existence, control of its own. It is not a substance. Substance lies with US company only. So suppose on this ground, the TT benefit is denied. So all right, consequence has taken place under the income tax law. But whether any implication under Benami law may also arise, whether the ultimate US company may also be treated as Benami beneficial owner. So one question before raising all this question arises before us is whether the Benami law is applicable on international transactions. So if I deal with the first question itself, no, Benami law is not applicable on the international transaction on the properties located outside India. Not applicable. But under the international transaction, it can still be made applicable on the properties located in India, even if the transactions are with resident and non-resident. So there may be a person who may be non-resident, but if the property is located in India, Benami law can be applicable. If property is located outside India, as was said by late Shri Arun Jaitley ji, then the government has brought out Black Money Act, which also we will deal shortly. So that is how we can say that US company can be treated as real beneficial owner. The shares lying in India can be treated as the Benami property, and Indian company as and the Mauritius company as Benamidar. So they may not be liable for prosecution because being not located within the territorial jurisdiction of India, but the property being located in the territorial jurisdiction of India can be very much attached here. Then I will take the next slide. Then similarly, this section 90 has been changed, section of the Companies Act, whereby SBO concept has been brought out, significant beneficial ownership concept. So under significant beneficial ownership concept, if a company makes any such disclosure whereby it is proved that shares held by B are being actually controlled by Mr. A, then also this is a ripe case for action under the Benami law. Then another very important concept under Benami law, that whose burden is what. Under income tax law, the burden may be upon the assessee to prove a particular claim which he is making to substantiate his transaction. But under Benami law, as I said earlier, my dear friends, that the fabric is totally different. There is nothing which is common between the income tax law and Benami law. Only one thing is common, that the department is same. Law is totally different. That is another thing, that they are implementing this law in the same fashion and they are implementing the Income Tax Act, but the fabric is different. That has been held by many judgments. That is P. Lilavati Supreme Court, Mangathai Yammal Supreme Court, speaking through Justice M.R. Shah, and there are other good old judgments which have been relied upon these judgments, though they are also from Supreme Court. So I mean the position under the position under the law is very well established, that under the civil jurisprudence is very well established, that the burden to prove a particular transaction as Benami is upon the person who is alleging the transaction to be Benami. That is initiating officer under this law. When I raised this issue, as I got the opportunity before the tribunal, that sir, here the burden is upon the initiating officer, then the reply from the other side was that now PBPT Act has been brought into on the picture, so therefore the benefit of these judgments may not be available. But Honorable Justice Manmohan passed a very detailed reasoned order in the case of Pamela Bhardwaj, and wherein he, in the detailed order, he has held that now the judgments of these benefits, these ratio of these judgments of the Supreme Court shall be very much applicable upon the PBPT Act proceedings also, because the fundamental remains same. Then this case study is there, we can skip. And this case study I would like to deal, whereby in non-resident Indian buys land in state of Gujarat. In the allegation was that he has bought land in the name of his friend, Indian friend, because he himself was not able to buy the land in his own name because the land was agriculture. So it was treated as Benami property. Indian friend has been treated as Benamidar. The foreign, that is non-resident friend, has been treated as beneficial owner, and land in India has been attached. So income tax proceedings have been started, Benami law proceedings have been started, and FEMA proceedings have been started. If the facts are like that, then the law may take its own course. But if the foreign friend has only made investment, has only assisted the Indian friend in providing finance, then it may not be treated as Benami. So P. Lilavati judgment is directly on this issue, and following this judgment recently, Honorable Adjudicating Authority has decided this issue in favor of these persons, agreed parties, that under such circumstances, merely because the non-resident friend has made the finance, it will not be treated as Benami. And this is a very important judgment which has been recently issued by the competent authority designated as Adjudicating Authority from Mumbai. Yes, friends. So that is briefly which I wanted to touch upon the PPPT Act provisions. Whatever further questions will be there, I would definitely like to deal with them. But before that, I would like to touch upon certain finer things about the money laundering law, so that you can understand the basics of the money laundering law also. My dear friends, any idea what do you, in common parlance, understand from the term money laundering? Whether somebody said that money laundering means converting black into white, but converting black into white is tax evasion. So money laundering is something more than that. So in terms of color, if I denote, I would say converting red into white can be equated with the term of money laundering. Now the term red here signifies some involvement of crime, blood. So therefore, if any money is generated from commission of an offense, a crime which is designated as crime under this law, and that money so generated is shown as a clean money not from crime but from legit activities, that is tainted money shown as untainted money, then we can say that that the offense of money laundering has taken place. So I mean the various examples. So illegal or dirty money converted as legitimate money is the offense of money laundering, and the authority who has to enforce this is the Enforcement Directorate, and it can be explained as these three stages. Stage 1 is when commission of scheduled offense takes place. Stage 2 is when generation of proceeds of crime takes place, and stage 3 is when commission of money laundering is done by placement, layering, integration. Few examples I have already given of money laundering in my earlier 2 slides. So I will be taking up few more situations, which is most prevalent situations here in the country as on date. Okay, I will, after covering these definitions, the most prevalent situation which everybody is facing, that is troubling most of us here. So what is proceeds of crime? As I said, then when the proceeds of crime are generated, and this is liable to be attached by the Enforcement Directorate. Proceeds of crime means any property derived or obtained directly or indirectly by a person as a result of criminal activity relating to a scheduled offense, or the value of any such property, or where the property is taken or held outside the country than the property equivalent in value held within the country or abroad. That will be treated as proceeds of crime. In common parlance, in general words, suppose Mr. A has committed an offense, say offense of theft. Whatever money he gets, he deposits in his bank account, it is proceeds of crime. Suppose from the bank he makes payment to another person, and the other person also knows that yes, this is stolen money, and still he does the transaction, then it will be proceeds of crime in his hands also. Scheduled offense, as I mentioned, any offense which is mentioned in the schedule part A or B or C of the PMLA will be treated as scheduled offense. Then the most important part which I wanted to discuss here with you is the reverse burden of proof kind of concept. Dear friends, as you would kindly know, that the basic fundamental of our constitution in the criminal jurisprudence is that a person will be treated as innocent unless he is proved guilty. And burden to prove that he is guilty is upon the person who is alleging that he is guilty. Otherwise, he will be presumed to be innocent. But this kind of fundamental burden of proof has been attempted to be reversed under PMLA law under section 24, which says that in any proceeding relating to proceeds of crime under this act, in case of person charged with the offense of money laundering, the authority or the court shall, unless the contrary is proved, presume that such proceeds of crime are involved in money laundering. Now, the most, I would say, difficult part which people are facing while dealing with the actions under PMLA taken by the Enforcement Directorate is that it is always taken on the face value by the Enforcement Directorate that the entire burden is upon the person who has been charged from the very beginning itself. And if the situation is like that, every innocent will find it difficult to prove that he is innocent, because something which is negatively cannot be proved. So, if he says, prove that you have not done theft, so how will he say that he has not done theft? So the burden to prove that he has done theft should be upon the person who is alleging. So therefore, we explain the situation like this, that the law does not shift the entire burden. As I said that there are 3 stages. I will open that slide again. This slide I am opening again. There are 3 stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So what the law is envisaging under section 24 is that the burden under stage 3 only is shifted. Burden under stage 1 and 2 remains upon the prosecution, that is Enforcement Directorate. That is whether the person has done theft and he has got in possession some money. These 2 things have to be proved by the Enforcement Directorate unless proved by another agency. Now, if 2 things are proved, then the 3rd thing can be presumed to have been done unless rebutted by the person who is charged with this offense. That is what is the intent and the literal meaning and the correct meaning of section 24. But what they are doing, they say no, stage 1, 2, 3 entire burden is upon you, which is not the correct position as per law, and which is creating immense hardship for the people whosoever have been bitten by this law. Now, as I have mentioned, that there have been situations whereby all over the country, huge number of actions have been taken upon many people because of this situation which has arisen, which I am putting before you. That suppose a large size borrower had taken a loan, could be builder or any other company, from the bank or consortium of bankers, say rupees 1,000 crores. Business goes bad, or say siphoning takes place and the account becomes NPA, non-performing asset, and then the default takes place, and because of the default the bank comes into trouble, and under the trouble bank files an FIR with the investigation agency, say CBI, that so and so borrower had obtained a loan by fraud or has violated the terms of sanction and has changed the end use, misused the money, siphoned off the money, etc., etc. On such kind of FIR, allegations are that scheduled offences have been done by the said borrower. Since allegation is that scheduled offences have been done in terms of cheating, forgery, etc., etc., so then ED gets the right under the law to take an action. So ED comes into action, files a ECIR, records ECIR, and starts its action. So now once it starts the action, as you know, the ED has the power to make attachment of the proceeds of crime. So proceeds of crime is something like that, it does not remain static, it moves. So I will give you an example. For example, you pick up an ant, small insect, dip it in the ink pot, take it out, leave it on the, say, white paper. Wherever it will go, it will move, it will leave a trail. Similarly, proceeds of crime are also like that. So this borrower company in this example, enjoying the loan facilities of rupees, say, 1,000 crores, with whomsoever it may have dealt, will come under the radar of investigation of Enforcement Directorate. And the most difficult part here would be, it will be difficult to compute the proceeds of crime. What was the proceeds of crime? And the person whosoever has dealt with said borrower company, whether they also dealt with it as knowing that it is proceeds of crime, or they have dealt with genuinely. So thousands of people come under the radar, and right and wrong is mixed, and that is how the people are facing difficulties all over the country. So 90% of the cases being done by the EDR under this category only. So here comes the role of the chartered accountants. Here comes the role of the chartered accountant brothers and sisters to assist the courts and the lawyers who are functioning in these areas, to help them computing the correct amount of proceeds of crime, because lawyers themselves are not competent enough to understand what the proceeds of crime is, how it is to be identified, how it is to be computed. Some of the steps I have listed out here, which I can quickly read. For example, finding out the sources and quantifying the amount of proceeds of crime from the commission of an alleged offense, identifying the properties to be attached, acquired with such POC, identifying the source of such properties and connecting it with the POC, then identifying loan utilization in the attached property, then calculation of the correct value of POC, then valuation of the property attached in comparison with the alleged POC, then proper financial accounting analysis, then preparation of the money trail for the attached properties to demonstrate the sources of funds. So friends, this is all about the anti-money laundering law, which I wanted to discuss. So other third law, which I think must be known, at least basics about this. So I will touch about very basics about the Black Money Act. Black Money Act only talks about two things. If any person has any income earned outside the country which is not offered to tax in India, so therefore the person has to be resident, only then question of taxability in India will arise. So any resident earning money abroad does not make disclosure in India in his income tax return is covered under this act. Second, a person having an asset outside India, foreign asset located outside India, which is not disclosed in the income tax return in India, shall also be covered under the rigors of Black Money Act. So he will be charged to pay tax on the aggregate of both. That is a tax in respect of his total undisclosed foreign income and asset of the previous year. So that's all about it. Now all the provisions are surrounding it. So that is how you can compute the interplay, correlate the interplay between the three laws, that one law in what manner will affect the other law in the manner which I have explained, and then from there you can also take it forward from there. The most difficult part about the Black Money Act, which I will say, is that if a person is having undisclosed foreign asset outside India or undisclosed income outside India, he will be liable to pay tax. But if the person discloses the asset which is located outside India, whether he is out of the purview of this act and clutches out of the clutches of this act, the answer is still no. Because in addition to the disclosure, he has to also satisfy that this transaction is not from the evasion of any tax, in the opinion of the assessing officer under the Black Money Act. So two conditions. People generally understand that there is only one condition, that there should be disclosure. I say there are two conditions attached. A, disclosure. B, disclosure to the satisfaction of the assessing officer. Now, they have not said satisfaction on what parameters. It's not mentioned in the law. But my understanding is clear, as far as my personal understanding, based upon the interpretation of law, that the person who is being given a show cause should be in a position to explain that no income tax evasion has taken place. Whatever assets or income he has abroad, these are properly tax paid. So that is all about these two laws which I wanted to mention. And rest, whatever queries come to your mind, I mean, if Bansal sir want to have any issue, or Sunil Gargji or Geeta madam or any of the audience, I will be most pleased to discuss on any of these laws, whatever we can discuss here, dear friends. Thank you very much for the wonderful audience which you have given me. Yes, sir.
Okay, Ashwin ji. Thank you, Ashwin ji. Any audience? Any question from any audience? Hello.
I think I don't know whether this session can be interactive.
Okay, question.
How can I read the questions?
One minute. Nitya sir, I am in agreement with your driver's example, as both of you know the posio and usage of car.
Possession and usage of car.
This is a question for Vrinder Kakkar.
No, I don't know whether it is a question or it is an agreement, expression of an agreement.
Yes, it is. It seems to be from the question that it is an expression of agreement.
Okay. Thank you, Kakkar Sahab. But if any question is there, I mean, that may also be put forth.
Facts of the case. Leslie paid the consideration property acquired by B. Once the property sold by B and sale money transferred to account of C, department proposing B as Benamidar and A and C as
Beneficial.
BO.
Probably BOs means beneficial owners.
beneficiary.
Look, whatever allegation, department has all liberties. But I quite often say, and I have been arguing it day in, day out before the competent authority, before the Honorable High Court, I forgot to mention one very, very important judgment. On merits, there is only one judgment. There is only one judgment which is available in the as on date coming from any High Court. Is that in the name of Zara Investment, coming from Honorable Telangana High Court, is that the burden to prove Benami is upon the authority who is alleging it, or upon the person. And number two, conditions should be shown to have been fulfilled. There, the department simultaneously invoked 29A and 29D. Then Honorable High Court has said 29D, if the company is saying that yes, I have paid the consideration out of my own funds, then invoking question D, question of invoking question D does not arise at all. So therefore, the obligation to show fulfillment of conditions mentioned in 29A, B, C, or D rests on the shoulder of the department. Whatever allegations are there, they must be based upon some cogent material and support the allegation. Only then it can be shown to be proved to be Benami property. Thank you very much.
But practically, we are seeing that burden is on the Zazi.
Yes, sir. सर आपने बड़ी अच्छी बात कही. आपने सर बड़ी अच्छी बात कही. आपने ये कहा कि burden is upon the SSC. अब वो क्या सोचते हैं कि उनके सामने जो पर्सन है वो SSC है. वो भूल जाते हैं कि साहब अब हम इनकम टैक्स ऑफिसर नहीं है.
हम बेनामी हैं अथॉरिटी.
अब हम कुछ और लॉ डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. They should forget that they are income tax officers. तो वो SSC के ऊपर जो burden होता है वही हैबिट और प्रैक्टिस रहती है.
वही फिर हम
वही प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट करता है. यस सर.
Any other question? However, in its order, the IO has not made A and C and AOP. Whether such order of IO is legal?
Look, it is not necessary to make them AOP. What is necessary? That he should say that A and C both had paid the consideration, and A and C both are enjoying the benefit of the property. In what proportion it may not be necessary to identify, but they are enjoying the benefit as an owner and they have paid the consideration. The two conditions have to be fulfilled. If not fulfilled, not Benami. Clear and simple, period.
Whether cash given to entry operator to arrange RTGS in his proprietorship concern, bank account and later on during search on entry operator, he gives a statement that this cash belongs to his firm.
देखो, एक तो साहब जब हम क्वेश्चन पूछते हैं इस फोरम पर, whatever allegations are there, we should tell them these are the allegations. If these are the admitted facts that this is entry operator, then everything comes to an end. Who is going to, no court is going to give any relief whether the law is truly applicable or not. If the allegation, I mean, instead of allegation, this is an accepted fact that it is an entry operated person, then the worst possible interpretation under the law will be applicable. So I think you should first of all correctly word your questions, particularly on this forum.
Or if you are yourself is admitting that he is an entry
Then
operator,
who will
what is
come to
left
your
with the
rescue?
department
And
to
why?
prove anything?
Yes. So if there are entry operators involved, then suffer the damage, whether the law is applicable or not.
And later on, he is asking, and later on, he files a revised return and makes disclosure of that cash as his income. So, in this
Look,
relation, whether
I will try to help Jain Saab in this manner. And this I have been arguing day in, day out. What I have been saying, that the department is also touching those things where I am myself the owner of the asset, I am myself the payer of the consideration. So the element of duality is absent. So it cannot be Benami at all, because there has to be presence of duality. Like Shri Krishna said in Srimad Bhagavad Gita once, 5,500 years back, that so long as a person is non-dual, a human being is non-dual, he will enjoy his life. He will not feel any problem. The problem starts when he becomes dual, meaning thereby he treats himself separate from me, from the supreme element. Then there is a problem. Similarly, here also. So unless duality is shown, Benami does not come into picture. But the problem is, there is one section 6(1), which says once Benami, always Benami. Right? But the counter to that is that if the transaction has been done prior to 1/11/2016, then the user of the word held under section 29A necessitates a requisite condition or obligation on the part of the initiating officer that on the date when he is taking the action, he must show that today also the asset is being held as Benami. Only then he can take action under the newly amended law post 1/11/2016 with regard to the transaction which have been done prior to 1/11/2016.
Now the question is particular that later on he files a revised return. Now it comes the interplay of Income Tax Act on it. So now there are several decisions which in Supreme Court later on act of filing the return does not wipe out the earlier act. You know, this is the real question.
Yes.
How the revised return will help that person.
That is what I am saying, that under Benami law, section 6(1) is very, very dangerous, which says once Benami, always Benami.
And it is a retrospectively also.
So again, they have picked up So again, they have picked up the principle. The legislature has picked up the principle from Gita only. कि कर्म जो किया है वो पीछे पीछे ट्रेल की तरह चलेगा.
And the further question is coming, and whether debtor outstanding as on that date can be attached under section 24.
अच्छा, अब मैं इसको थोड़ा ब्रॉड तरीके से एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ इस सारे कॉन्सेप्ट को. That recapitulate that situation of R, B limited and R limited. Now what they are saying is that whatever proceeds are there, they are all Benami. Since their proceeds are Benami, so therefore the property purchased by R will be also held as Benami and it will be attached. I say something else, because they say whether in converted form, in proceeds, whatever will be there will be Benami. I say something else based upon the correct understanding of law. That every transaction between two persons is a separate transaction. I mean, suppose transaction between A and B separate, B and R separate, R and somebody else separate. And every transaction has to be dealt with and understood and legally given effect to separately and independently. For example, here B Limited gives cash, Mr. R gives cash to B Limited is a transaction in itself. B Limited gives check to R Limited is a transaction in itself. R Limited gives issues and shares to B Limited is a transaction itself. Separate. 3 transactions have taken place. R Limited is holding the amount in bank account is a separate issue. And then from there, R Limited buys property from some another seller and pays check to him. That is a separate transaction between R Limited and that seller. Then R Limited is owning the property is a separate issue altogether. They are all separate issues and transaction, and each has to be separate, as each has to be tested separately. So let us test each of them. Transaction between Mr. R and B Limited is a transaction whereby he is giving cash and he is acquiring shares. So whatever shares he is acquiring, he becomes the Benamidar, the owner. I mean, the allegation can be that he is holding the shares, not his in capacity, but on behalf of Mr. R. So that is a transaction between Mr. R and Mr. B. So he may be Benamidar of Mr. R and R may be beneficial owner. Is a separate transaction. Now B Limited is giving money to R Limited. That is a transaction and a real transaction between the two entities. And R Limited is issuing the share certificate to B Limited, a real transaction between these two entities. So as far as R Limited is concerned, it received the funds and gave its share certificates, actual real share certificates. So therefore, whatever has been given by B Limited to R Limited are not proceeds. It is a transaction. Proceeds will arise only when proceeds can take place only when the asset is transferred. So asset acquired by B Limited is shares. Whenever it will be transferred, it will amount to proceeds. Shares are not yet transferred. Shares are with B Limited only. So whatever B Limited is holding are the shares, are the asset which are still held. So amount given by B Limited cannot be said to be proceed. That is an amount of investment. And then R Limited makes another payment to it. That is not conversion. Conversion can be said to be done when an asset is extinguished at the cost of the other. For example, raw material is converted into finished goods. Finished goods, raw material comes to an end, it ceases to exist, and finished goods takes birth. Debentures are converted to shares. Debentures are extinguished, shares takes birth. That is called conversion. Here conversion has also not taken place because R Limited is making payment to seller. Seller is having the money in his bank account and money is existing in the bank account, still existing, not having been extinguished. Similarly, the property coming from seller to R Limited, existing, still existing, both the things are existing. It is not a kind of conversion. And on the top of it, R Limited is having funds in its own capacity. R Limited is owning that asset, immovable property, in its own real capacity. That cannot be said to be Benami. R Limited is sole owner, a legal juristic person. So that is how, similarly, these debtors also. These debtors are the own asset of the person whosoever is owning. They cannot be said to be proceeds of crime and all that. So that is how each transaction has to be separately analyzed based upon the facts and circumstances of the case. No generalization, no sweeping actions are possible, permitted, prescribed under the Benami law. If these are being done without the authority of law and based upon the incorrect understanding of law, as per my respectful opinion. Sir, are you on mute, sir? We can't hear you, sir.
Are there some decisions on this issue that each transaction has to be seen separately?
As I said, so far these are to be tested. But if you see from Zara, before Zara, wo jo SOP diya hai, the SOP issued by the board, and the performer itself says that every property is to be examined separately. Facts and circumstances of every property is to be examined separately, number one. Number two, the definition itself of Benami transaction talks about a transaction, bunch of transaction. So therefore, each transaction is to be tested through the prism of the conditions which are prescribed under A, B, C, and D. And to make ready reference, my dear friends, brothers and sisters can peruse the judgment of Telangana High Court in the name of Zara, which were recently argued by us, and you can have some kind of understanding from that. But the law is still evolving, and let's see how the things go.
under PMLA, there is a tracing of the crime money. But how
Yes,
does
sir.
it apply to Benami transactions? Tracing of the money.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
They applying to this Benami also. Is it correct position of
Sir,
law?
again same thing. Again same thing. A person, if he has done smuggling and he is doing also something which is giving rise to Benami transaction, for example, he is giving money to B Limited buying. So it will depend upon how he is structuring that transaction. So if he is creating two offenses by doing one transaction, he will be liable for two offenses.
Now there is a question for Indian value. If someone is raising fake invoices to export services, both companies owner are same, which law would be applicable?
सर पहली बात तो इसमें कुछ वैल्यूज वाली बात ही नहीं है. इंडियन वैल्यूज तो ये कहती नहीं है कि फेक इनवॉइसेस होना चाहिए, पर चलो मान लेते हैं कुछ ऐसी एलिगेशंस हैं कि फेक इनवॉइसेस हैं. इंडियन वैल्यूज तो नहीं कहती है.
Any other question? Anil Jainji, whether in a case of Hawala operator who transfers the money pertaining to other outside India and there is a search on this person and statement of account of 2, 3, 4 months is found.
Look, sir, these kind of questions you have to answer based upon that at any given stage of time, if any asset is created whose ostensible owner is X, but the real owner is Y, Benami comes into picture. Now, if in this manner, suppose some bank account was created whose control was done by somebody else. If control is being done by the person only, so-called operator only, then it is not Benami. The law, under some other law, may be violated. Consequences may be there, not in Benami. So that is what I have been arguing before the courts. There may be breach. Suppose addition under section 68 takes place. There may be a breach under other law, but not under Benami. It will depend upon the facts and circumstances of the case that where the breach has taken. Wherever the breach has taken, the consequence or the action should happen under that law.
I think that there is another Indian value. If someone is raising fake invoices,
Same question is being asked.
Same question has been repeated. Okay, so I think that now once more, whether in this situation the entire cash sent to somebody else will be treated as foreign asset in the hands of the Hawala operator, or only the commission will be treated as foreign income?
Entire amount can be treated as.
So the session has been very interactive and useful for all the audience. And we from our heart thank Mr. Taneja and are indebtful to you with our audience that such a wonderful session was there for them. I think that they will be resolving all the issues in their mind, and with your knowledge they have become enriched to avoid the further difficulties to be created in these regards, because nowadays these economic offenses have been taken very seriously by the department, and as you said earlier that there is a database sharing between the departments that would create a lot of problems, because Indians till now they are thinking that law will do this something, but the way laws have been amended and their interplay has been increased, so that is going to be a very difficult time for the problems. So I now hand over the mic to Sunil ji for further closing ceremony. Thank you.
Before Sunil ji does closing ceremony, the last words in this session which I would like to place, that from this Benami understanding and reading of Benami law, I have tried to grasp certain finer principles of living a good life. The way I would like to express is that what through Benami law the government is trying to suggest that whatever is mine, I should believe that only to be mine. Whatever is not mine, I should neither claim it to be mine or believe it to be mine.
That is very correct.
Whatever I am inside, I should portray myself outside also that way.
And that is the object of Benami. That is the
object of Benami.
that is the main object of Benami.
Yes. And in other words, get rid of Benami life, live real life.
Leave.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And forget about Benami.
So thank you अश्विनी जी. आपने जो कहा लास्ट में, और मैं उसको इस तरह से कहता हूँ, जो प्राप्त है वो पर्याप्त है.
Yes, क्या बात.
जो प्राप्त है वो पर्याप्त है, और जो उसके बाद पर्याप्त है उसके पीछे ना भागो.
Yes.
मैं सब 2 स्टार वार्स की आज लास्ट में जुगलबंदी में आपकी सुन रहा था. एंड जब आप 2 स्टार वार्स बैठते हैं और किसी टॉपिक को डिस्कस करते हैं तो उसका निचोड़ जो मक्खन निकलता है, तो आप बंसल साहब और आपने जो आधा घंटा लास्ट में डिस्कस किया, इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग और बहुत लोगों को बेनिफिट हुआ. आई एम गेटिंग अ लॉट ऑफ कमेंट्स. दीपक गोयल जी कह रहे हैं वेरी इंफॉर्मेटिव वेबिनार. अदर्स आर आल्सो सेइंग द सेम. एंड सर, दिस बीइंग अ मॉडरेटर ऑफ दिस वेबाथॉन, बंसल साहब, मैंने आपकी बड़ाई ऐसे नहीं की थी शुरू में. यू आर रियली द लाइटिंग फोर्स बिहाइंड ऑल दिस. अदरवाइज सर 40 वेबिनार करना, ऑलमोस्ट 100 आवर्स की ट्रेनिंग देना सर, ये प्रभु इच्छा के बिना और आपकी ब्लेसिंग के बिना सर पॉसिबल नहीं था. इतनी लंबी जर्नी हमने की है अश्विनी जी. और सर हमारे मतलब 3000, 4000, 5000 व्यूज होते हैं हर वेबिनार के, और बड़े कमेंट्स मुझको मिलते हैं. और सर इट्स ए लाइफ टाइम, रादर इट्स ए लाइफ चेंजिंग एक्सपीरियंस फॉर मी, एटलीस्ट इफ आई एम कंसर्न. तो मुझे जितना ज्ञान प्राप्त हुआ, जितने लोगों से मुलाकात हुई, और मोर देन 7000 चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स आर रेगुलरली associated with our YouTube channel, and more than 1 lakh professionals are there on the Facebook channel, sir. So and the way you have explained all the things, really it needs one more session where we are going to do the micro level or to in-depth analysis of the things. So friends, this is the ultimate session of the Webathon series, and the final session will be on Saturday, and that will be the ending of phase 2. We are not going to stop here, friends. Take my words. Again, we will start the journey in January 22 with phase 3. And with these words, I again thank my elder brother, the lighting force behind all this Webathon, Sri IP Bansal ji and Ashwini Bhai, for his gracious presence here and for aligning us. Thank you, friends. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sunil.